Let's reveal that mystery chart, Kelly, from before the break in our Market Navigator today. If you check out the focus, it's on Lululemon. That was the mystery chart. Shares of the $50 billion athleisure behemoth have been on a tear since bottoming out kind of last summer, last August. But what's ahead for the company, and how will it fare under the Trump administration's new tariffs on Chinese goods? The company does rely on Chinese imports for part of its supply chain, a notable portion of it, particularly in fabrics. Now, our next guest is here to break it all down for us and give us her thoughts on where that stock is headed, short, medium, and even longer term. Joining us now is our fan favorite, Katie Stockton, founder and managing partner at Fairlead Strategies. She's also a CNBC contributor. So, Katie, thank you very much for being here. Let's break down the athleisure trade. There is pretty much one name that people associate most closely with it. It is Lulu. It's reflected in the stock. But where do we think it goes from here?
Well, it's had a really big run, as you mentioned, and we've been bullish since about 300 for Lulu, but we still see positive intermediate and now newly positive long-term momentum behind the stock. And I think that's the most important takeaway, is that holders of Lulu can feel pretty good about not only where it's come from, but the fact that the trend still does have positive momentum. We really cannot say that about the vast majority of stocks right now from a bottom-up perspective. So as much as the major indices have held on to their gains, the breadth just hasn't been great. And obviously the mega caps have been a bit of a drag. So we do have a weakness in momentum really sort of around the world. So Lulu stands out in that regard. Now, shorter term, we would look for a pullback for a better entry. The 50-day moving average is roughly 381, and that to us is a great place to sort of revisit the stock and try to take advantage of this long-term upside.
Katie, we have so many more consequential questions to ask you, but what is it a fashion thing? I thought we'd all moved on to denim.
Well, I had to change out of my Lululemon to get dressed for this segment. So it's obviously very popular, and the charts won't answer the questions that are more fundamental in nature, but they will help us understand what the sentiment is behind the stock. And it's obviously been quite positive. Intermediate term, if you go way back to about 2020, there's a very wide long-term trading range. And it's kind of an unusual setup right now in the broader market. Within that range, there is upside to the upper boundary, which is roughly 485. So it's not a near-term objective, but that is long-term resistance. And you couldn't describe the stock as long-term overbought at this time.
Now, Katie, one last thing before we kind of let you go here. Trade is a big part of the discussion right now with regard to many of these names. And as a chart watcher, are there places in particular that you are seeing in the market, whether they be individual stocks or sectors or certain indices, that set up better as we see what could be a prolonged trade war/negotiation play out?
Well, the news is out there already, and I would argue that it really hasn't hit the likes of Lulu. So I think that's a positive in a way for that stock individually. More broadly, what we're kind of interested in from a technical perspective are stocks that actually have been in down cycles and seem to be emerging from them. So that would be more common right now in defensive sectors like healthcare, consumer staples also. Even some REITs are starting to perk up after downdrafts. So that's where we're most interested for counter trend exposure until at least the major indices get to a place where we feel there's a better entry at hand. We think that could happen within a few weeks. But right now, most of our indicators from a top-down perspective still do point lower. So we think that the odds are best in stocks that honestly look a little bit different than the S&P 500. Yesterday, as an example, we put out a buy recommendation in Regeneron, and that stock had just cleared its 50-day moving average, so it sort of crossed our radar for that reason.
It's very interesting as the market sells off and as we await Amazon in what's been kind of a rough spot for big tech earnings.
So, Katie, this is our permission for you to get back into your yoga gear if you would like to. We're not sure what the rest of your day holds, but thank you very much, Katie Stockton, for the views there on Lulu and trade wars and everything else there.